Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm continuing speaking about episodes from season 7. This one is episode 9, The Beau. Early in the episode, Grandma gets a letter. It is from an old beau of hers, Marcus Dane, someone she knew when she was quite young, around the same time that she was being courted by Zeb. She was being courted by Marcus, and he has sent her a letter. In this case, it is once again read out loud by John. Ralph did seem to get that task many times to be the one who read the letters out loud. In this case, it is not bad news, but it is a letter of condolence. He's heard about the passing of Zeb, but also a letter of friendship to Esther. At Ike's store, Ben and Jim Bob have stopped by to fill Jim Bob's car with gas. Corbeth comes out and says that she's only allowed to sell $3 of gas, that they're going to be only delivering gas once a month. So Ben and Jim Bob speculate that this means that there's likely going to be gas rationing coming up. And Jim Bob makes the passing comment that he should have built an electric car, which was rather ahead of its time, just the concept in the 1940s for sure. But even in the 1970s, we were not yet able to get electric vehicles. Marcus Dane arrives unexpectedly at the Walton house, and Grandma is a little disconcerted to have him arrive. She has a very sweet reaction here. Yancy's looking to start up some sort of a business, and he's decided that what he's going to do is set up a still and try and make, some sort of bootleg whiskey or something. And but what he's making tastes terrible. But Jim Bob stops by, and he has another idea for Yancy and gets Yancy on board to help him with an experiment. Marcus shares with Esther that he went to school and got his engineering degree, and now he is going to be doing some sort of work for J.D. Pickett, that he will then be coming to town on a fairly regular basis. So this is interesting news for Esther. As a gift, Marcus has brought some sort of a rose bush for Esther, and they pick a place to plant it, which is over near the shed. And afterwards, she's trying to say something, and she's very frustrated, which was very real in terms of what Ellen went through trying to get words out and how frustrating it was for her when she couldn't articulate her thoughts. And in this case, Marcus is sort of going, I understand you're trying to say something, you're frustrated, you can't get the words out. And he confesses that about 5 years ago, he had a stroke and he was nearly as debilitated as Esther is, and that he had to really work to get back his speech and movement. However, there's no residual sign with Marcus that he had this stroke. There's nothing in his speech, there's nothing in his movement. So I had to sort of question how bad his stroke would have been if he was able to recover that much when Ellen worked so hard for so long and recovered very little of her speech and almost no mobility in her left side, or right side, actually. That was the side that was paralyzed. Esther has invited Marcus to stay for dinner. And at supper, he shares mischievous stories about Esther when she was in school. And Esther's a little embarrassed about that. And the family, it's really, Olivia and John they're very charmed by these stories of Esther in her youth and how different she was. And Elizabeth is none too happy because she does not like all of this attention that Marcus is paying to her grandmother. Regarding Jim Bob's plan, he shares with Yancy that he is looking to create a fuel and alcohol that will burn hot enough to run a car. So he's looking to create that kind of a fuel. Corabeth has another venture that she is delving into, which is millinery work, and she showcases a hat that she has made. And then when Grandma is asked on a date by Marcus, Olivia comes to Corabeth and is in search of a hat for Grandma to wear for this date. You see her try on this silly little feather hat that she has some fun with, and ultimately does find something that she thinks would be right for Grandma. I have been asked a bit about these hats and who made them and things like that over the seasons. My understanding would be that Warner Brothers had quite the stock of wardrobe and hats from all of the years of movies and television and stuff like that. And our show had access to, I believe, most of that Warner Brothers stock. So I imagine that they would go through the stock and find things of the period that worked and just make use of those. However, if there was maybe something very specific that was needed, perhaps somebody from our wardrobe department, our costumers, would then potentially create something specific to it. But I don't think this particular hat was specific. Maybe some extra flowers or netting or something might have been added to it, but possibly not even that. For this storyline, someone would have had to build a believable looking still, whether it was our prop department, our art department, exactly who would have created this still, I'm not exactly sure. And I don't know what they might have had in Warner Brothers stock in terms of these types of items to create this believable looking still. Esther is having second thoughts about this date with Marcus, and I think just feeling self-conscious and uncomfortable with the idea of going on a date with someone other than Zeb after all the years she spent with him and having lost him. Olivia presents her with this hat, and I love the look on Michael's face as she watches Esther, the relationship between Ellen and Michael in some of those scenes after Ellen had her stroke were just so heartwarming, and Michael was so good in her interaction with Ellen. And here you just see the real love between the two of them and that Michael felt for Ellen. John sits with Marcus as they wait for Esther to come out for their date. And it's a very awkward conversation. And at one point, Marcus asks John, "Do you want to ask me about my intentions?" And John's like, no, it's just really kind of cute and very awkward. And then Esther comes out all dressed up for her date. Marcus has brought her a corsage, and it's just a really sweet moment. Having gone to dinner and the movies, Marcus and Esther have now gone to this the candy shop, and they are enjoying sundaes, ice cream sundaes. And Jim Bob comes in with his date, Tanya, and Grandma. He's a little surprised to see her there, and he introduces his date to his grandmother, and then turns, and this is Marcus, and Marcus says her Beau. So Grandma feels a little awkward because that has now been voiced, and I think she does not know how she feels about this. John lies awake in bed, waiting for Esther to get home. Olivia's trying to sleep. John's awake, and he's like a father with a teenage daughter, worrying about them and where are they, and they should be home. And Olivia's saying she's fine. He's like, I know, but she should be home. And when he does hear a car, it's just after midnight, he goes downstairs to basically confront them upon their return. And Esther says goodnight to Marcus, and then she sort of gives John a very disapproving look, that really sort of gives him the third degree with this look, very disapproving about the judgment that he is showing about her date with Marcus. The still has produced a level of alcohol that they're now going to test. So far, they haven't done what Jim Bob needs, but in this case, they are going to light the fuel, and if it lights fast, it means that it is strong enough and could burn hot enough, I guess, fast enough to fuel a car. And indeed, it does light fast, and they go to celebrate, and the flaming oil or alcohol drops on the ground, starts a bit of a fire. They have to stomp it out, but it is very cute. And they do then test it on the car, and they find out that it does run. Jim Bob goes home, and he tells Daddy about this. John is a little skeptical that it's going to ruin his engine when Jim Bob's putting it into his car. And at first it starts, and then it goes off, and Jim Bob says, I need to adjust the carburetor. He does, and then it fuels it. But Yancy and Jim Bob are thinking they can go into business and make like a grain alcohol that will fuel vehicles. But John reminds them that the government doesn't like stills, and so they best go find out what the rules and regulations are, even if they're not making a whiskey they're drinking, that the government still has rules about stills. Marcus comes to visit again, and here we have another case of the editing, the intercutting between the exterior of the house and the interior porch set on the soundstage. We initially see a fairly close shot of Elizabeth doing her nails. She's putting nail polish on. And then we see her point of view. We don't see her, but we just see her point of view from the porch, through the porch rails, to Marcus driving up with his car. So, of course, at that point, it is the exterior house set. When we cut back as Marcus starts to move towards the house, we never see the porch and Marcus. We just see him moving towards the porch. Now we are on the porch, closer on Elizabeth again, and we see Marcus come onto the porch. We are now on the soundstage again. So anytime you saw Elizabeth there, we were on the soundstage. When we saw Marcus drive up and get out of the car and move towards the porch, that was the exterior lot. I can tell this. I know what those sets look like. And I can also see through the front porch door and into the house, and the way that that furniture and picture and everything is set on the wall. I said, well, that is the soundstage. So just another case of seamless editing to create the illusion of we're all in one place. As Elizabeth talks with Marcus, she voices her concerns because, and Marcus basically says, I'm not going to take your grandfather's place. I never could. He was amazing, and basically shares a story about him always beating him and everything. And Elizabeth is pacified and realizes that she no longer feels threatened by Marcus. Marcus does then invite Grandma on a weekend to Richmond, all above board, chaperoned by his housekeeper. He wants her to meet some of his friends. And at first she says yes, she will go. I loved the construction of this shot. We are in the office of the mill area, the new mill, and we see John at his desk doing paperwork. And through the window, we see Jim Bob and Yancy arrive. I love how Yancy just sort of doesn't even bother with the door. He just kind of hops over the door and out. Those doors were problematic at times. And they sort of enter into the camera, adjust to bring them into the mill, and it becomes a two-shot of them. So that kind of takes care of that part of the scene. And then all they would have to do is turn the camera around and do a reverse shot on John. So it makes it simple. They didn't have to do a separate master and then reset for a two-shot and then reset for Ralph's. So a faster way to get the scene shot. Within the scene, we find out that they have a letter from the government saying they've gone through various different agencies, and basically they're saying it is impossible to make a fuel from grain alcohol that would actually run a vehicle. So Jim Bob's kind of left saying, well, is it illegal to make something that they say is impossible to make or doesn't exist? And it doesn't say that. So they're thinking that it shouldn't be against the rules. They've registered what they're doing with the various different agencies. So they feel like they can at least produce enough of it to run some of their own vehicles and some of their equipment, like the mill, blades and things like that, that it will help them when gas is being rationed. So that's going to be their plan. When it comes time for Marcus to pick up Esther for their weekend, he finds out that she has changed her mind and she's over watering the rose bush, and he goes and talks to her, and basically, she's not ready, and she's not ready to leave the mountain for any time, and that she will always love Zeb. And Marcus respects this and says that they can still be friends then, and that they will remain friends, and they will continue to see each other as friends, but there will be no further sort of courtship. Then this moment got me when I was watching at the end of this, because as the camera pulls back and they're talking about how Marcus and Esther, he came by, they saw each other over the years, but as they pull back from where they are, you see the garden, and it's empty, where there had been vegetables and stuff planted. And there was just this moment where I went, oh, Will had planted that, and he was the one that tended it, and he was gone. And somehow seeing this empty garden in this moment just hit me, because it just said to me, Will was gone, and it was reflected in this garden no longer being there. This was a big episode for Ellen. It was a lot of work. It really focused on Esther, and would have been a lot of scenes and a lot of really hard work for her. I'm sure it was a very exhausting episode for her to do, but she did such a beautiful job in it. So I'm so glad that they gave her this episode to really shine once again. Besides all of the family and Ellen's guest appearance here, we also had Ronnie Claire back as Corbeth. Ike was not in the episode, so he did not make it back, whether he was supposed to be and was not available, or whether they just decided they didn't need him and Corbeth could do all of it. I don't know. But Joe was not in the episode. We, of course, had back the fabulous Robert Donner as Yancy. Always great to have him back. Those storylines were always such fun. And then the role of Marcus Dane was actor Arthur Space. And he was, in looking at his credits, he was also in Ralph's film On the Nickel that Ralph wrote and produced and directed. He also did an episode of Little House on the Prairie, so another one of those crossover actors who did both series. He did a ton of film and television over his extensive career, but they said he would best be remembered as Velvet's father in the TV series of National Velvet, and then as veterinarian Doc Frank Weaver in the series Lassie. And then Tanya, Jim Bob's girlfriend, was played by Lisa Lindgren, who had a recurring role for some time on General Hospital. And I was sad to see that she died young. She was only 45 when she passed away. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons about the episode The Beau. If you're enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. I'll see you next time for more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.